At 5:14 a.m., a post on Truth Social initiated a 48-hour countdown for the global economy. President Trump issued a direct ultimatum to Tehran. The message was explicit. If his terms aren't met, the United States will hit and obliterate Iran's various power plants, starting with their largest facilities. This sudden escalation arrived barely 24 hours after the president had publicly discussed winding down the conflict. Trump's condition to stop the strikes is non-negotiable. Iran must fully reopen the Strait of Hormuz to shipping traffic, and it must do so without any further threat to commercial vessels. The 48-hour deadline makes the world's energy supply the central stake in a negotiation over the future of the region. Tehran responded almost immediately through the Qasem al-Anbiya Operational Command, the military central coordination center. If Iran's energy grid is hit, they have pledged to target all U.S. and allied energy, information technology, and desalination infrastructure in the region. Desalination plants, which remove salt from seawater to create drinking water, provide a vital lifeline for millions in the Middle East. By targeting these sites alongside data networks, the threat moves beyond military bases to civilian survival. With infrastructure like water and power on the target list, both sides are testing a strategy of mutually assured disruption, where basic civilian needs are the primary source of leverage. The crisis centers on a physical bottleneck, the Strait of Hormuz, a 21-mile-wide stretch between Iran and the Arabian Peninsula. 1/5 of the world's crude oil and liquefied natural gas passes through this single gap. There is no comparable alternative. Since late February, Iran has maintained a de facto blockade, preventing the majority of shipping traffic from entering or exiting the Persian Gulf. The shutdown has forced nations to burn through their strategic reserves and look for longer, more expensive shipping routes around the continent. This chart shows the direct result of the blockade. Since February, the price of crude oil has spiked, climbing higher as the standoff continues. Prolonged closure would eventually trigger widespread inflation as energy costs filter through the global supply chain. By leveraging this 21-mile strip of water, Iran is using geography to strain its adversaries' economies. The blockade began as a direct response to the joint U.S. and Israeli military strikes on Tehran that were carried out on February 28. The escalation reached a new peak over the weekend when airstrikes hit the Natanz nuclear enrichment facility for the second time in this war. While Iran claims there has been no radiation leakage, satellite imagery shows clear structural damage to several buildings across the site. Iran retaliated with missile strikes on the Israeli towns of Arad and Dimona. In Dimona, a building near the nuclear facility was hit, and over 100 people were injured. With both sides striking near nuclear sites and reactors, the threshold for off-limits targets has vanished. This makes the threats in the 48-hour ultimatum credible and imminent. There is a physical flaw in the 48-hour ultimatum. Even if Iran agreed to the terms immediately, opening the strait to commercial traffic within 2 days is virtually impossible. The water is currently littered with unexploded ordnance, munitions that failed to detonate, making navigation hazardous for large tankers. There is also the high probability of active minefields laid during the weeks of the blockade, requiring a slow, systematic clearance effort. On the surface, the channel is patrolled by nervous, armed security forces from both sides. Any movement by a large vessel could be misinterpreted as a hostile act. Reopening the strait to a level that is safe for global commerce would take several months. Because of this, the 48-hour deadline acts less like a negotiation and more like a trigger for war. The global economy remains hostage to a 21-mile strip of hazardous water and a ticking clock. The front lines of this conflict now run directly through regional power grids, regional water supplies, and the shipping lanes themselves. Despite their immense military power, the U.S. and its allies cannot simply force the strait open. The logistical hazards of the blockade mean that a forced opening could still lead to the economic collapse they are trying to avoid. In a world reliant on a constant flow of energy, raw military power can be neutralized by 21 miles of water. If the strait remains closed, the resulting energy shortage and global inflation will dictate the economic health of every nation involved.